It's a shame that the viewer cannot hear the sad voice of Zoom saying recording in progress when it starts.
Yeah, especially now that like ChatGPT has added voice capability, which is really remarkable.
Yes, we should talk about that because I think this has been a life changer for us. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. Hello and welcome to our cosmic journey. Today is the 11th of November at 5:02 p.m. here in Berlin, Germany. Hello, Trey.
Hello, Jake.
So let's talk a little bit about ChatGPT and what it's been doing. So it went down for a little bit, and Trey and I, our livelihoods now depend on livelihoods. Our sanity now depends
Our very
on
existence.
our ChatGPT, because I don't know if you know this, but like there's a lot of things in this world that require you to arduously go through a process of writing or creating, and um those things are much better helped out by a computer, especially when you're writing emails that are of dubious value and things like that. And so when it went down, I think Trey and I were getting a little bit sad and upset because we're paying members. We both really enjoy the service, and we use it very often for lots of different things. And then all of a sudden it came out with all of this new stuff, and we have been playing with all of the new stuff, which we're very excited about. This is well, all of a sudden I'm like, I think I was just about to turn into a check-in question, which is, what are you most excited about with like the new ChatGPT? But like, what were your feelings? It's not a check-in question.
What were my feelings with the new spate of updates?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just that it's really remarkable how quickly OpenAI is able to sort of stay on top of this just incredibly fast moving topic. And we're already seeing things like Arc, our beloved web browser that we both use and love, had added a bunch of features based on ChatGPT that were just
Or an
beautiful.
AI thing. We don't exactly know what AI service they use.
I thought they said that there was chat. Well, anyway, whatever.
Whatever.
Some sort of machine learning thing, which was like doing things like summarizing links on, like when you do a Google search or whatever, or like doing just like little things like changing the file name of a download from whatever ridiculous thing the like service that you downloaded it from called it to like something that makes sense, which is like incredible. It's such a miraculous thing. And so this stuff is just shifting so quickly. And then all of a sudden, like they come out with like voice capabilities and image generation and
Right.
and the ability for you to spin up new bots. Like you can create like new little purpose specific
Yes.
which there's very much like there's a really interesting magical angle to this as well, because there's this idea of like how something that like how something can carve pieces of itself off that give you sort of an interface into this much bigger thing. And yeah, I think it's incredible. It's really incredible. Like I think in one way it's really dizzying to be alive right now, and just like it's like head spinning every moment.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's like it really does feel like a miracle. Like
Yeah.
it's an incredible thing. It's a really incredible thing.
Yeah, and I think we needed a miracle because both Trey and I pay for Loom as well. And we got an email from Loom saying kind of stupid stuff of like, you have to pay in order to download your videos, and we're going to start moving free features into a paid thing. And I think we started the week thinking to ourselves, wow, software sucks, and is kind of
Yeah.
the crapification of software. And then all of a sudden, like clockwork, comes in OpenAI to say, no, we've got ChatGPT, and also you can change the voice of ChatGPT to be her, which Scarlett
Excellent.
Johansson's voice. So Scarlett Johansson and I today, we were walking, not today, but earlier this week, Trey and I were walking, and I was demonstrating that you can now have a conversation with the conversational AI, which is very nice. And I said, I want to learn Dutch. I know some German. Can we learn Dutch together? And she just started in like, okay, let's start learning Dutch. And the biggest problem I have with German is the speaking part. I think it's the biggest problem for everybody. And so when I'm going to learn Dutch, my third language, I'm going to start by speaking and only learning by speaking first. And I think it's going to be different. Anyways, that's a lot of stuff that's going on. It was nice to see the crapitude of Loom
Yeah.
to be supplanted by the amazingness of OpenAI this
And
week.
just to clarify something that you said, we don't actually know that OpenAI had anything to do with Scarlett Johansson for coming up with it, one of the voices.
I get. I am.
It does seem like it.
It seems to fit,
Nice.
right?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
seems to fit.
Yeah, it seems
Yeah.
like they said like, oh, her is actually like a really great, like we should probably have something that sounds like that. But anyway, but we
Also,
don't know that. We don't have any insider info.
so you need to allow me to share my screen. Der Host hat die Freigabe des Teilnehmersbildschirms deaktiviert.
Yeah.
Otherwise known as the host has deactivated the sharing of screens for you.
Yeah. I should just set that as like some default in Zoom, I think.
Yeah. This is another question that we had this week around reasonable defaults and perspectives and all of that thing. We won't talk about that this week.
To
go ahead.
To circle back around on your point about Loom too, it's like as much as ChatGPT and or like the stuff that OpenAI has been doing is like miraculous, the stuff that Loom is doing is like the opposite.
Whatever magic Loom had, the folks at OpenAI have seemed to like taken the metal straw into the company and sucked out their magic and then put it in their product, which is fine by me. Yeah. So today's episode is called Back to the Chart Future. It is episode 8. And we'll be doing your check-in question. And then we've got various things around the new chart. This WebAssembly is cursed. And I am yet again going to talk about an object map and talk a little bit about that. But before we get to all that, Trey, your check-in question, please.
Yeah. So my check-in question for today is I was thinking about Greek and Roman gods as astrological archetypes, as they're often used, and in particular Prometheus. So Prometheus was a Titan who sort of did a bunch of things that annoyed the gods. But one of the things that really annoyed Zeus was that he stole the gift of fire, or stole fire, basically from the gods, which Zeus had like withheld because I think of some earlier shenanigans that Prometheus got up to. So
basically Zeus had a launch event. Zeus had a launch event for fire, all planned, a marketing plan, the whole rollout thing. And then Prometheus came in and scooped it. And he's like, okay, well, now I'm going to teach you by rolling a rock up the hill for the rest of your life, if I remember correctly.
No, that's oh crap, who is that?
I thought that was Prometheus.
Prometheus gets chained in the mountains and an eagle eats his liver every day.
Right. That's the penalty for stealing fire and ruining a very good marketing launch event.
Very, very good launch event of reintroducing the thing that you had removed from people. It is actually, there's sort of an interesting corporate angle there. But anyway, okay, so here's my check-in question. That was all preamble for it. In the mythic version of you, what great act of defiance does Zeus punish you for?
Oh, my act of defiance that then requires my liver to be eaten every day by
or maybe some other creative punishment.
Or some other creative punishment.
Yeah, but this question isn't so much about the punishment part of it as it is about the what did you do to deserve it?
Do you have a good answer first? Because I'm struggling.
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, I don't know if it's a good answer, but I have an answer.
Do you have an answer? Because I'm struggling.
Yes. Yeah. So I think mine would be having like colluded or collaborated with, let's say maybe like Hermes or Mercury or something to exercise or to bring clarity of thought and reasonableness to the human race. like a gift of everybody having like a good sense of common sense, let's say.
Yeah, I like that. This goes to a check-in question earlier, and I'm going to just co-opt my answer from that check-in question for this. The other one that I had was that Lilith, Adam's first wife, being kind of like sick of God's will and going out of the garden, and then all of a sudden,
fuck y'all, like, I'm out.
Yeah, and then her being punished for all of that. I think the first act of defiance came to my mind is giving her Me Too movement and then basically canceling God for that as a Me Too movement. And then I have to get penalized for that because now God is canceled.
Yeah.
Which is all very
God
weird.
would definitely punish you for canceling God.
We're canceling God.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Unless God
That's
was in prison.
unless God was in, yeah, Azkaban, wherever God goes. But the other one that I want, the act of defiance, is that I can it's a way for me to slap people across the face and get rid of their brain worms, and so that their brain worms ooze out of their ears, because Zeus, for reasons, needs to make sure that people keep their brain worms, because knowledge is power, and he wants to make sure that like not everyone has this knowledge. And that's the only other one. I kind of like the idea of like helping out Lilith with her like
Yeah.
kind of Me Too
Yeah,
feminism
yeah, I
movement.
like both of those. Can you
Yeah.
can you explain to the gentle viewer what brainworms are?
Yeah. So, okay, literally, there was a woman who actually had a worm in her brain, and we'll link to that article.
Let's not. Nobody needs to be exposed to that.
I just say I'll put trigger warning on there, because it is a lot. But before this happened, Trey and I were always using the term brainworms to describe people who had, I don't know how to explain it. I don't want to say unreasonable or irrational. Like what I want to say is like the people who seemed to be disconnected so far from humanity or reality that like the way that they look and act made it seem like that their brain was filled with worms. I understand, it's fine. And so the idea here was that if I could create some kind of magical artifact, what would it be? And it was the staff of brainworms. And what I would do is I would club people with the staff of brainworms on their head, and then the brainworms would die and pour out of their ears, and then they would gain some sense of like humanity, rationality, and connection to their fellow man and woman. That's the staff of brainworms. All of a sudden now I've kind of co-opted into this question. I'm all over the place, but you know what? Justice for Lilith. That's where I'm at. Hashtag justice for Lilith.
Yeah. I like that. Good one. Good check-in, everybody.
Good check-in. Yay. I think I can do this. And so, good check-in, and then it will start lasering. Maybe. No, it doesn't. Okay, fine. Who knows what's going on today?
Zoom probably is like messing up Apple's.
Sometimes I do this and then it'll put a thumbs up.
Oh, there you go.
It does that. So then if I do this, it should do fireworks, right? Hey,
Yay!
there they are. Okay. Good check-in, everyone. Good check-in. Okay. We're on to new chart. Who dis? Mr. Henry.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so let's go into demo mode.
By the way, the intro I think was like 13 minutes. That is our longest intro by
even
far.
For us, that's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous even for us.
We're gonna have to start.
We're gonna have to trim it down. Trim it down.
You can just edit. Do all this in post, honey. You do the you do the editing. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. I'll just share the whole thing. Is that gonna mess up with?
No, it should be fine.
Zoom do the right thing. Okay. Right on.
Okay. I don't know if this is going to be edited or not. I just saw a message on your screen that was very, it was between you and a friend, where you have a game playing thing that has a very dirty word to it. And it seemed, anyways, we'll see if we keep it in.
Do like a little black box or edit or something.
That was a lot. That was a lot for the viewer, by the way.
This is why. Here. I'll just do this.
There you go. Much better.
Just in case we don't like end up showing it again when I alt tab.
Jeez Louise. Okay, anyways, please.
But yeah, we like to get creative with our game playing session names. That's all the viewer needs to know. Hey, look, it's a chart. It's a very rudimentary chart.
Hey.
Okay, so there's a few things that I want to talk about here, because so anybody who remembers from last time, and it's amazing how much happens in a week. I'm really glad that we do these videos, because sometimes it's like I'm amazed at how fast a week goes by, and then I'm also amazed at how much can be done in a week. So last week we showed we were coming out of our like having to deal with the network latency problem, and then like moving to sort of calculating the stuff on the client via WebAssembly. We talked about as above versus so below a little bit. And then And just showed some very like code-y kind of things around um, getting the like astronomical data. And so now I'm actually displaying these things on the page, as you can see. And I'm actually plotting them on a chart, which is there's
Now, why is this special? Because somebody might not have watched episode 6, Our Doomed Metal Band, and doesn't understand what is happening.
yeah. Without going into too much detail, basically we had to not throw away because a lot of that work still is valid, but we had to change the way that we were doing our chart rendering because the way that we were doing it would make us susceptible to network latency, causing the experience to kind of suck of going back and forth over the wire for doing like chart calculation. And we really want to have a fast, responsive, like if we can't deliver on the core thing, like the hot dog of our hot dog stand, as it were, of like having a chart be just fluid and fancy and beautiful and like fast and all of these things, then it's not worth it. There's plenty of other software in the world. Like, what are we doing? So
Exactly.
we're really building this, like we're building up on this kind of like core concept of things being very fast and snappy and having a lot of capability for things like animation and stuff like this. And so we ended up having to completely change sort of our architecture to bring in this new thing, which now we have this kind of like split brain sort of thing, which is why we talk about as above and so below. However, it's actually, now that I'm knee deep in it, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I've started to get a little bit of a feel for it, and we're kind of, now that we have enough sort of code in place that the pieces are gluing together, it's kind of feeling a little bit better. But I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. There is a few things here that I want to shout though, because so we're showing this. We're showing data right now. This is actually right now as of when I refresh the chart. So this is the actual placement of the sun and the moon right now. So if I come over here to Urania, and we're looking at the sun and the moon in an unrotated chart, and voila. So you can see that's the same. I can tell you that it's the same too. So this is actually plotting the things correctly. Now, we talked in the past about a system that we have in Cosmic, which is called perspectives, and probably you're going to hear this word a lot more in these early cycle videos, and then eventually you're just not going to hear that word anymore, because really it's an implementation detail. It's not something that an end user will actually have any real meaningful exposure to. It'll just be it's an underlying system that allows us to do some really important things that we want to be able to do. And so one of those things is being able to say, like, this is a way of like looking at a chart and having only certain things be meaningful, or like I want to only see, sort of the 2 luminaries and the 5 visible planets, and I don't want to see the, sort of the non-visible gas giants beyond that. I only want to see, like I don't want to see the zodiac at all, and I only want to see absolute positions, and I don't want to see the ascendant and the midheaven because I'm doing, sort of Richard Tarnas style, very like big archetypal type stuff, and I'm only looking at the association relationships between sort of the outer planets, things like this, right? So like, how do you do this? And so what I wanted to show here is that even though we're in this mode where we now are doing all this stuff directly within the browser, directly within the client, as we call it, like this stuff is like running on your machine, even though it's being sort of like served from our server, but there's a connection between those two things. And it's this connection, and how that connection is done is really, really cool. And it's part and parcel of the sort of underlying framework of Elixir and Phoenix, which we've talked about a bunch in the past, and what we get from that. But again, without trying to go into too much detail here, one thing I want to show, and this will be a little bit nerdy, but just go for a ride with me here. This is a
database.
This is a database. Yeah, this is our actual like data that we have in Cosmic today. And there's a few things in here, but one of the things that I want to kind of talk about here from the very top level is that we have this concept of perspectives, which is actually like a thing within our system. And then we have like a default perspective. And then we have things which are called entities. And entities are kind of like in different categories, but they do things like say like, show this planet or use this house system or whatever. And then those get sort of glued together in what's called a many-to-many relationship, but it doesn't matter. Just that's kind of like the whole sort of thing. So right now we're showing Placidus houses. Now this is the database that is running in so below. So it's sort of the backend.
The backend.
Yes. Yeah, the backend. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I think this 10 is, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think whole sign is 14. So I'm going to change, I'm just going to change the database really quick. And then if I
Bam
here, you can see
that
we're now showing whole signs.
Very good.
And so this is showing that there's the plumbing between these, between sort of what's happening in as above and what's happening in so below is all working. This connection is there. I had to refresh the page. This is not because of the architecture. This is actually just because a lot of this is just being like slapped into place right now, but it's like being developed in real time. But yeah, so that kind of shows how this sort of like communication is working. So that's one thing that I wanted to show. And I could also show like removing things and stuff like that.
Yeah, but just trust us on this one.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, this all works.
Entities can be removed, they can be added, we can change house systems, and all of this, if you remember back to episode 3, the Cosmic Console, when you can imagine that one day you're going to hit Command K and you can command through the Cosmic Console all of these things. Change to Placidus. Let's remove Mercury. Let's add Zodiac. Let's move to a sidereal instead of a tropical zodiac. All of those things will be enabled here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's actually working very similar to how it used to work, because all of that is still the same. It's just now we have this like front end layer that we're using for the charts, which now is kind of like glued together to this back end layer. So, and they're operating in harmony.
Not in total harmony, because we do have some WebAssembly
we'll get there.
issues. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so
I was doing a transition for you. I apologize.
Yeah, no, we're not. No. We got 2 more things before we transition.
Sorry.
Really transition.
All right.
Put a bookmark on it. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to show. So we talked a lot about this idea of being able to provide having the speed of being able to do all of these calculations within the browser of the client that you're viewing the application from within, giving us also the ability to do animations, to do effects, and to really bring life into the chart so that we can do things that that I think like traditional sort of static chart stuff doesn't do. You get a little bit of a hint of this kind of like in Urania, where you have like the ability to sort of like select things to just focus in on the aspects of those things, or just highlight things, this kind of stuff. This is sort of like the first layer of kind of how we think about this sort of interactivity, but being able to like really do a lot more with that. And so I just really quickly slapped this in before doing this demo, just to show that even though this looks like a completely static thing, this is actually being rendered in real time. So I'm going to click this button, which is going to move us ahead 1 day. So it's going to update the chart. And also, the moon is going to spin
the moon.
So this is showing that we now have this capability of being able to do 60 frame per second animation with like really smooth, beautiful, like a lot of capabilities within this sort of framework that we're using. And we're being able to get this astrological data and use that to plot the chart as well. So one more thing I wanted to talk about here too. So if I click this button again, you'll see that these are updating for right now. So that's like getting second to second. You also might notice here, let me refresh this so that the moon stops spinning. You might also notice that the moon looks slightly different than the sun here. So the moon has slightly thicker lines and the sun is a little bit thinner and whatever. So the sun, I'm actually sort of drawing by saying like, draw a circle that looks like this, and then draw another little circle that looks like this. Whereas the moon is actually a little glyph image
Mm,
that we made in our design software Figma and then
right.
exported and then imported here. And I really wanted to demonstrate both of these things. Also, that outer circle is just drawn on there. So this also gives us the ability to kind of mix and match these two
Yeah.
worlds.
We can draw directly on the canvas. We can take in sprites and do
Exactly.
whatever we need to do.
Yeah. And we can do all kinds of fancy animations and all kinds of just really cool stuff. So, so this really unlocks all of that, and this actually demos the stuff that I was talking about from last time. And then just the one last thing that I wanted to show, because I didn't actually show this last time, is so if I'm just going to put a little bit of space here so that you can see, this is the log of the server. So this is the log of Sopolo. And what I want to show here is just if I refresh this page, you can see that there was this request to astrology. There's a bunch of stuff that happened, including like getting perspective data and all of this stuff. And then now, if I were to navigate someplace else or hit the server again or whatever, we would see more logs here, right? But when I hit this button to update the positions and update all of this data, if I come back here,
Nothing.
nothing
You
was
don't talk to the back end because that's all on the front end. That
Yeah.
is all
So there
Isaac
will be
has
some
above,
things that we talk to the back end for sure,
but not that.
but yeah, but not this. So we have this very, very fast iteration loop now.
And we've seen this before. So there's other cloud-based astrology software out there, and they all do this call back whenever you change time, right? This is the thing that we had talked about that was 2 episodes ago that wasn't really working for us. And so Trey, mostly, if not completely, did everything in order to make sure that these things sat within the front end, Isaac as above, and that we were going to call those things so that they feel instantaneous. They're not doing these round trips, these loopings. They're not going to be subject to network latency issues and disruptions like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But now it's time for my transition. It's not all sunshines and rainbows. However, there are other issues that we have come to find out. Can we talk a little bit about what is going on with WebAssembly and how it is possibly cursed?
Yeah, it's not WebAssembly that's cursed. So we talked a little bit last time about C, the programming language, and how garbagey it is. One of the reasons, so I should really clarify like what I mean by garbagey, because it's really in comparison to languages that we have today, sort of, mostly. Actually, there were some really good languages that were out right around that same time, but let's not get into it. In particular, especially when you look at like a modern, beautifully designed language in comparison to C, you get a lot of things. You get a lot of stuff out of like a modern programming language. One of those things is memory safety, which is like ideas around like when you're creating things that the computer needs to keep track of. It's keeping track of these things, and then when you don't need them anymore, it's able to say like, okay, you don't need this anymore. Like I'm going to free that up, and then other things can use that space. Whereas in C, you have to do all of that yourself, and that means that it's very easy to make mistakes. It's very, very easy to make very bad mistakes in C. And there used to be this kind of like idea in the world of software engineering, which is that like if you weren't able to do C and do C well, that you're not like a real engineer, right? Because you don't like understand all of these intricacies and like whatever. Like that's like that's like saying like I'm gonna put you in like I'm gonna take an average person off the street and put them into like a rocket car, and with no steering wheel or like a joystick instead of a steering wheel. And it's also like super, super sensitive. So you just barely move that stick and like you're going to spin out and run all over the place. And then say like, well, if you can't drive this car, you're not a good car driver.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. If somebody gives me a test that feels like a fraternity hazing ritual,
Yeah,
I'm not usually a big fan.
Exactly. C is like the fraternity hazing of programming languages.
Yeah, it really is.
But anyway, because we sort of we inherit it because of the Swiss Ephemeris, which we're very happy with and very thankful for.
Very thankful.
Yeah. I want to be very, very clear here that I'm harping on or let's say criticizing. I'm critiquing. That's what I'm doing. I'm critiquing with very sharp language the programming language itself, and not necessarily things that are built with it. Because one of the things that it does allow you to do is build very fast software that is able to run in a lot of different environments. And this is one of the things that this is because the Swiss Ephemeris is written in C, we're able to bring it over into our as above as a WebAssembly, and this is like that whole thing. However, while I was working on this and doing this animation stuff, I was actually doing astrological calculations second by second. And so for every second, I was updating the chart, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And then after a few seconds, actually, it was after a fair amount of time, I started getting memory allocation errors coming out of our wrapper, probably. This needs further investigation, but I think it's out of the wrapper that we've built around utilizing, because the Swiss Ephemeris is a very large API. So there's like a lot of stuff that it does. And we've kind of like narrowed that down into just a few things that we really need. And something in there is fucked up or screwed up, sorry, that is causing this memory leak. Or probably a memory leak. This is the most likely reason. So anyway,
Okay.
so this is something, it's like just one of the things that now is a complication of the fact that we're doing things in the way that we're doing them. And we talked before about how, this is a much more powerful and potent way of doing things, but it comes with a cost. And this is one of those costs. And we could just gloss over it and not talk about it at all, and probably, whatever happens in the future years from now, we'd be like, we'd forgotten about it, like we wouldn't even know that was a thing. But I really wanted to put it in here because it is one of these things about like, there's always trade-offs. There's always trade-offs in all things, by the way, not just in software engineering. There's always trade-offs in almost everything. And if you aren't paying attention to the trade-offs, you might be making bad choices.
Yeah. And I think to that point, we have made a design process that is trying our hardest to put all of the questions forward about the trade-offs we're going to make and put the questions forward about the complexity we're going to take on, so that we don't paint ourselves into a corner like so many other pieces of astrological software have done. And yet again, well, you know what? I'm here. The only thing that I can provide in this company is good transitions. That's fine by me. So what you're seeing in front of you is a different version of the same thing that I've showed over and over and over, which is the astrology object map, going all the way from the user object, meaning the member or the guest, all the way through charts, the native, and it just keeps going and going and going and going and going and going. It's not because it's because we have about 2,500 years of astrology to get through. And all of this stuff is not going to be done in a V1. But if you don't think through the complexity ahead of time, what ends up happening is you start making decisions about what you are going to take on and what you're not going to take on in a way that can mess you up later. And so a lot of the complexity of how, like, just take a look at what's called point base. So point base is anything that's a planet, a point, or a cusp, or maybe not a cusp, what it can inherit. And like, look at all of this stuff. It is huge. It is a huge amount of stuff. And a lot of the stuff that comes in here, I have to start questioning about, like, I understand, like, I have a feeling for like the interpretive nature of some of these things, but I don't have a full understanding of these things. So what is it about the north node and the south node of a point that we care about? What about the anti-scion and the contra anti-scion that we care about in these things? And when you kind of go down this list and you start like looking into what is provided by the Swiss Ephemeris, what other astrology software provides, and then you have to start making decisions about, do I bring this into this chart because to this object map because it's something that we eventually want to honor. Sometimes in astrology, because it's 2,500 years of stuff, that some of these things in here it's hard to know how much legitimacy is in these things, or how much of these things are, yeah, I'd say legitimate things that are used for interpretation versus somebody's idea of interpretation. And you have to start making decisions, and the hard decisions here, and I think this is what's caused a lot of questions for me, is like when you approach something new and you get this new piece of data and you have to say to yourself, yeah, it's easy to just add another metadata field in here or add another kind of core content field in here, but you don't want to legitimize something that is actually not in the practice, like not in the historical practice of astrology. And sometimes when you use the term the historical practice of astrology, that can be used as a cudgel against things that I don't like, but might actually have value. I don't know. This is just like more of a feelings based discussion about like how to deal with 2,500 years of astrology. And this is the best way that I've come up with it. This is by far, like by no means done. There's there's a bunch of stuff in here that is not finished yet, but it's coming along and it's great. It's generating very good discussions with Trey. And you'll see a bunch of these tags here that say questions, for example. There's a bunch of questions that I now have to like go and deconstruct because we don't want to make assumptions on these things.
Yeah, it's 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 such a vast surface to try to build a system around.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
yeah, it really is. There's just kind of like like what you were showing those like what was it, north and south
Yeah,
nodes,
in the
latitude, longitude,
points.
north, and I realized that those aren't actually the lunar nodes. That's not like the
No.
north and south node that we would describe it. It's literally like the apogee perigee of any body in the solar system.
And this is exactly what I said. I'm like, is this just the moon? Is
Yeah,
this everybody? No,
yeah, yeah,
everybody. It is important for,
yeah,
I say everybody. It's important for everybody. Maybe not everybody, but
yeah, yeah.
everybody.
Yeah,
Yes.
anything that's orbiting will have this. And it's yeah, and it's interesting because, like to that point of like sort of where do you draw the line, like most people that I know of, and now when we have these conversations, I usually try to be very careful about not making more broad or sweeping claims than like of the people that I hang out with or that I talk to that are practicing astrology. Like what I hear is, or I haven't heard of that because
Yeah.
it's like we talk a lot about obviously like K2 and Rahu, the north and south nodes of the moon,
Right.
but we don't really talk about the north and south nodes of every other planet. And it's like,
Right.
well, but are there people out there who utilize those? And
I
are
think
there
so.
other astrological traditions? Because you're just talking about like we had this whole thing about like looking at how amazingly beautiful and incredible Thai astrology charts,
Oh, yeah.
and like,
Yeah.
and we haven't, and it's like as soon as you think you've got like a beat on things, like it's like there's a whole massive, like a whole nother thing. It's like there's a whole other
Oh,
population
right.
of people that have been iterating on this stuff as well. It's like
Exactly.
we'll get there, but
And there's a bunch of stuff in here that is not a question of legitimate or illegitimate. Like we know for a fact that Vedic astrology is incredibly important, that the Chinese zodiac is important. Like these things just can't exist in here because like my brain would explode and this chart would be crazy and Trey would kill me. And
yeah,
so we have to make some decisions, but just because it doesn't sit here today doesn't mean it's going to not be in our product tomorrow. We fully understand that also we're humans, we're fallible creatures, and sometimes we're going to make mistakes. And when we make mistakes or we make oversights, people, we are going to have a lot of methods and openness to feedback, and people are going to give us their feedback so that we can react to that feedback as quick as we can.
yeah,
Best we
exactly.
can do.
And we just want to make sure that we have enough complexity in this map so that we are building a system that allows us to layer on more and more stuff without
Right.
like significantly breaking the model, basically. So we need to make sure that we have, like, yeah, we don't want to end up like this thing that we had to do with as above and so below. We don't want to do that again. Like that
No.
already was pretty painful.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I'm
and
glad we found it when we did.
yeah, exactly. Like if we'd have found this later, we wouldn't fix it.
No.
Like it would be too
No,
it
we
would
would be
be too
like,
costly.
it's too late. Yeah, exactly.
So and this is the thing too of how these like there's this when you draw a line, you know, you if you have a point, you draw a line out, you know, like a very small change in angle here, like close up, creates like this very, very wide sweeping arc, you know, further out. Um,
Yes.
and this is why a lot of like people in software engineering and building products, digital products, or really anything, even like anything that you're doing that takes a long time, things that you're doing upfront uh, are going to either help you or screw you down the road.
Yeah.
And you want to have
Your
as many things
job,
helping you as possible.
if I can give you a piece of life advice that has helped me out, your job as present Jake or present Trey or present viewer is to help your future self. And I want you to have empathy for your future self, to say, when you're in a moment, to say, like, if I just write down this thing, I know that later when I come to this back to this thing 10 weeks later, that my path, my future self will thank my past self, which is now my present self.
Yes.
And I will say that there are many times that I show the most gratitude I ever show is to past Jake, because I'm like, that guy aces. So glad that he did that, because like, and I'll like walk into a situation of dread to be like, I have no idea how I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And then I walk into the situation and I just see that things were kind of like laid out and set up, fully knowing, you know, that I had empathy for my future self. I'm just like, oh, I want to give that guy a hug. I can't give that guy a hug. It's weird.
Yeah. He's in the
Yeah.
past
He's in
now.
the past now.
But yeah, there's that. It was just reminding me of that study that, you know, I think it was like kids and marshmallows or something, where they,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, like how,
Exactly.
like if you don't eat the marshmallow now, then you'll get two
You get a
marshmallows in
payoff
like 5 minutes.
of marshmallows later. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then you know the kids, and then they monitored them for like into their adult lives, and the kids that were able to wait for the delayed gratification were much more successful in life
Yeah.
by any measure of success. And so
Yeah.
you know that
It's a
this
form
idea,
of that for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah, and I think you could really like, this isn't something that's necessary. I mean, it's probably something that's inherently set in everybody, like many things. But you can change that dial, right? Like you can
Yeah.
think about, and I think this is a really nice tool. Like that idea of empathy for future self is a really good way of sort of like bridging that arc and saying, like, you know what, like like screw delayed gratification. I can't deal with that, but I know that it's gonna really bug me, or it's gonna be really a problem down the road if I don't do this thing now.
Yeah.
And
And
that's basically all of like this object guide. It's all the stuff that we're
yes,
doing now to keep us from ending up in that situation.
correct. And that's why it's taking so long,
Yeah.
because it's like you have to front load a lot of discussions that in a normal quote unquote product development process that would happen while we're coding or while we're designing UI. And then all of a sudden we're just stapling on. We're like, well, we can just staple on a fix here and staple on a fix here. And then all of a sudden you make software that people don't love, that is nonsensical, and that you have to write huge user guides for. And I've been reading huge user guides from people that talk about like, well, I would say like my favorite videos that I've watched so far have been essentially quasi user tests. And there are a number of astrological like content producers that want you to learn the kind of premier software tools. So Solar Fire tutorials, Janus tutorials. And while they're doing these tutorials, what I'm looking for is not like the big issues, because the big issues are very obvious. It's the small stuff. So for example, I saw a astrologer, Kelly Surtees, walking through showing chart search on Solar Fire. And she was being very, very careful about what word she typed in there, because she didn't want to accidentally expose client data. And so she said, I'm pretty sure that no client data has the word queen in it. So she typed queen and hit enter. And I was like, the idea of like, if I am a astrological kind of content producer, shouldn't I have an easy way to say, I'm going into a mode of like sharing my screen, and I want to make sure that that personally identifiable information for non-prominent figures is not shown. And then these are the great things that I really love about design, and that we can bake into this thing. And then when I brought that up with Trey was like, that's a brilliant idea. We love that. And I think people are really going to appreciate that. Not that anyone watches these videos. But if you are one of the people that watch this video and you stumble upon this like little humble request, all I want you to do is to post, like record a video of you using astrological software and just don't edit anything. Just do it. You don't even have to answer any questions, and then send it to me. And I want to see the subtle problems, like the subtle bumps that you run into, not the big bumps, because the subtle bumps are the interesting stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get more into research eventually too, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. I think the viewer has now had to tolerate us for 45 minutes.
Yeah. We've had to
Okay.
tolerate ourselves for 45 minutes.
I know. I'm tired. I want to eat. I want to have something to drink. This is lovely. Be well, kind viewer, and have yourself a lovely week.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.